You said this place was steps from the water.
We just haven't found the steps yet.
How much did we save?
Enough.
Enough to get lost?
Or you could book a stay with Hilton.
Welcome to your oceanfront room, just steps from the water.
The Hilton sale is on now. Book on Hilton.com or the Hilton app and save up to 20% to get the stay you expected. When you want savings, not surprises, it matters where you stay. Hilton, for the stay.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions.
April 5th, 1945. The jagged limestone ridges of the Gothic Line in Italy have stalled the Allied advance for months. At the crest of a hill designated Georgia, the men of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team are clawing their way upward through a storm of machine gun fire and mortar bursts. These are Nisei soldiers, Japanese Americans fighting for a country that at this very moment has their families locked behind barbed wire in internment camps back home. They aren't just fighting for a hill. They are fighting to prove that they are just as American as the other soldiers dying around them. In the center of the carnage is Private First Class Sadao Munamori. After his squad leader is wounded, Munamori takes the lead. He isn't just advancing. He's a one-man demolition crew. Armed with grenades, a rifle, and sheer cold-blooded determination, he crawls through a hail of lead to knock out 2 German machine gun positions single-handedly, clearing the path for his unit to surge forward. The 442nd charges around him now, a wave of steel and bayonets screaming as they overrun the German bunkers. The momentum is finally on their side. But in the chaos of the breakthrough, a German stick grenade arcs through the smoke. It doesn't land in the dirt. It hits Munamori directly on the helmet with a metallic clack and bounces into a shell crater where 2 of his squad mates are taking cover. Munamori has less than 2 seconds. He doesn't scream for them to run. He doesn't hesitate. In a final, split-second act of defiance and love, he dives headlong onto the grenade, smothering the explosion with his own body. He dies so that the men beside him can keep charging, cementing the legacy of a unit that would become the most decorated in the history of the United States Army. Sadao Munamori is the first Japanese American to earn the Medal of Honor. And he did it by proving that go for broke wasn't just a motto. It was a way of life.
Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week, the show where we tell the badass history of badasses. My name is Ben Thompson, and today we are going to look at a group of people who defined the word patriotism and heroism under circumstances that were quite uncommon. We're going to be talking about the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. It's a unit that was out there in World War II to prove that being American isn't about where your parents are born, but how hard you're willing to fight for the people who are fighting beside you. I'm going to tell this story, and to help me, we're going to bring back an old friend of the show, screenwriter, author, Shana Steinberg. Shana, thank you so much. It's awesome to have you back on the show.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm really excited to tell a story.
Yes. Now, I have to brag a little because I got to have a very fancy signed early release copy of the new book, Echoes of Infamy. So every time one of these comes out, I feel like I have you on to tell a story about World War II history, although that doesn't always make its way to World War II, and we don't always talk about the things that are related to your book. But with the 3rd installment in the Evelyn Bishop and Nick Gallagher series, we are going to talk about something that's at least related to your book.
Yes,
which is great.
very much so.
I have to say, I read it and I really liked it. Can you tell people what your book's about?
But yeah, so my 3rd book follows the same Evelyn and Nick. They are now a married couple who work together. And she is the head of a massive aeronautics firm, kind of based a little bit on Boeing. And she's about to break ground. And a soldier comes up to him, and he's Japanese American. And he tells her that she's building on stolen land. And what we come to learn is that the soldier was a member of the 442nd, who we're talking about today. But before that, he and his family owned a restaurant in Los Angeles. And when Pearl Harbor happened, they, along with, over 100,000 other people, were forcibly removed from their homes on the West Coast and put into internment camps. And, obviously these are really horrible, horrible, horrible places. And my main character goes from this internment camp and volunteers for the 442nd, which is amazing. But when he returns home in my book, his family has been torn apart by the war and torn apart by this relocation, and he struggles.
And then it's up to our heroes who they run an aircraft firm, but they're also detectives basically. And it's up to them to kind of figure out what's going on and help out. So how does their story in post-war California kind of relate to the specifics of the 442nd, who we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, I mean, the 442nd was a group of people who were all Japanese American. They came mostly from either Hawaii or the mainland US, and they were grouped together in this segregated unit and sent over to fight the war. And I think there's something really intriguing about that idea of, for about maybe not a third of them, but a lot of them had family in the camps. And to go volunteer to defend this country and risk your life for this country that has your family incarcerated is, I don't know exactly how to describe it. I think anybody who goes, it's heavy. It's heavy. I admire anybody who goes and volunteers to serve in our armed forces. But they really want a lot to go prove their patriotism. There's so much racism, and they're like, nope, we're going to show that we're Americans.
Right. It's a very powerful story. So you have these guys shipping out to Europe to fight for a country that is at this very moment keeping their parents and siblings behind barbed wire in the American desert. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it a little bit, but they were able to kind of channel this energy into, they had to prove themselves, and their unit motto was go for broke, and they did, and they became the most decorated unit in American history for its size and length of service. So we're going to look back at the 442nd, and we're going to get into their experiences and their battle. We're going to take a really quick ad break, and when we get back, we'll head to Europe.
Some things are impossible to miss, like an elephant in the room, or a bull in a china shop, or this season's amazing offers, brought to you by PayPal. Discover offers from hundreds of brands like Viator, Allbirds, and Tory Burch right in the PayPal app. Save an offer before you check out with PayPal and earn unlimited rewards. Download the PayPal app to get started. Terms and exclusions apply. See paypal.com/rewards terms.
Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come step into centuries of history that await in Scotland. Castles steeped in legend, walk along cobblestone streets. Come share the warmth of stories passed down through generations. This is a place with a past that is fully present today and all yours to explore. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/Visit Scotland.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Welcome back. I am here with author Shana Steinberg. And Shana, the story of the 442nd doesn't start with the battlefield, but with the stroke of a pen. In February 1942, Executive Order 9066 is signed. And it's a move that strips 120,000 people, 2/3 of whom are American citizens, strips them of their rights and forces them into internment camps. Now, Shana, can you walk us through the decision-making process? Who was being targeted, why, and how did the government actually manage to move this many people into the camps?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy story, but when you look back at the racism of the time, it isn't 100% surprising. So there were a whole bunch of very, very racist laws. And among them,
Anytime you see like a comic about, like, anytime you see like, like textbooks will always be like, here's like a political cartoon about the situation going on in the Pacific. And you're just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, it's so crazy racist. It's been, I mean, since the late 1800s, a lot of immigrants from China were coming over and they helped build the railroads, and a lot of immigrants from Japan were coming over. And it's kind of the same thing we're hearing today. Like, immigrants are taking our jobs, which is complete insanity. But there's a lot of racism when it comes to that. And America issued a law that after a certain point, people of Japanese descent, or people who had come from Japan and immigrated from Japan, were not allowed to become citizens. And it didn't matter how long they'd been there. It didn't matter how hard they had worked. They were just blanket statement, not allowed to become citizens. And they had children, which were known as Nisei, and they were born in America. So they were automatically American citizens. And at a certain point, the Issei, the first generation who had come over from Shan, were not allowed to hold land. They weren't allowed to have businesses. So they put it all in their kids' names. So you have this background of really exclusionary things. And then all of a sudden, Pearl Harbor happens. And obviously that racism does not go away. It's just magnified 1,000 times.
Yeah, and it's just like, I might not be able to go over and fight the Japanese in Japan, but I'm gonna say something shitty to this guy that like lives down the street from me, who was born here, and is not like a member of the Japanese Empire.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was this guy I remember reading an interview with this guy from Tacoma, and he was like, "Yeah, I saw a, not nice word for a Japanese person on the road, and I was going to run him over, and that was going to be my contribution to the war effort." It's
right, like Starship Troopers. They're like, "I'm doing my part."
Yeah.
Everybody went crazy and started killing stingrays after one of them killed Steve Irwin, and I was like, this is the last thing that he would have wanted, you guys. Seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, even people who were not in the exclusion zone, their businesses struggled because people are like, oh, I know I've always had you do my laundry, but you're Japanese American and I can't support you, therefore, sorry, and it's these people have been members of the community who suddenly find all these doors closed to them.
Right.
And so, with this order, they had been picking up people here and there, Japanese language teachers, people who were fishermen, people who, like our characters, had imported Japanese food. Any sort of contact with Japan was considered suspect. And a lot of people were picked up early January 1942. And they were specifically picked up because of some sort of suspicion. And then the rest of their families were picked up simply for being Japanese American. And they were given 48 hours to pack up their entire lives, get rid of their furniture or try to store it, all their personal belongings, family photographs, heirloom pieces of art that they had in their family for generations. They were allowed to bring what they could carry. And where they were going, they didn't have blankets. They didn't have clothes. They didn't have any of the basic necessities that you need just to survive. So rather than pack this thing that has so much meaning to your family, you have to pack a blanket, because otherwise, how are you going to sleep?
Right. And you're going to be there for an indeterminate period of time, right? You are now going to jail, and you can bring whatever you can carry with you. They end up in kind of this bleak, surreal existence behind barbed wire and guard towers, chain link fences. And they have to, anything that's left behind, like you probably still have to pay your mortgage, but now you don't have a job and you can't work and you're basically in jail. What does this look like for these people when they get to these camps?
You've come from an existence that's comfortable, that you've built, that you spent your life building. And first, a lot of them were sent to assembly centers like Santa Anita Racetrack here in California. And, they arrive on these buses and they're let out into this holding period. And then they're assigned a horse stall. And some of them have not even been swept out from the straw. They still reek. They still smell like horses. And a lot of people are going from these homes that they built into a 12 by 12 stall for their entire family. And
right, and grandma's like 80, and you nice get a, like horse poop. Yeah,
and it's not like, oh, look at these cots you get to sleep on, and oh, at least you have a blanket. No, you have what you carry in.
Like at jail, at least like there's a toilet and they sweep every once in a while.
Yeah, and I mean these places had these giant latrines where there are no stalls, there are no expectations of privacy. And it's literally treating people like animals, like, hey, you don't need privacy to do this. You can just, whatever, it's fine. And they did not have any of this organized. So people are showing up. There's no food for them. There's no organization about who's going to cook whatever food comes in, who's going to make sure that food does come in. Like these very, very basic things have not been considered and they haven't been taken care of for people.
And so these are kind of the conditions that these people are moved into in 1942. Now, there are, it's all ages, men, women of all ages, right? Yeah. And one thing interesting that starts to happen around this time, the War Department slaps the 4C classification on Nisei men. And this is, you alluded to these terms earlier. Issei is the first generation that was born in Japan. Nisei is the second generation that was born in the United States. And they were born U.S. citizens. They're being accused of being traitors for Japan, but they've never actually been to Japan. So these guys are labeled 4C. They're labeled enemy aliens and are ineligible for military service. Yet, despite being told they're not wanted, despite being herded into basically concentration camps, they are volunteering for combat service.
Yes.
Why would you do that?
I think there's a couple of reasons. Part of it is, one of the people I was reading about was like, what if this is the rest of our lives? Like, what if we are kept in these prisons forever and our families are here forever? So part of it is this idea of wanting to prove that you're a loyal citizen. And take away that, I don't even want to say stigma, but take away the idea of like, hey, you can hold people indefinitely because they're enemies. They're not. These people are genuinely volunteering to serve their country and prove their patriotism.
Right. I'm not a prisoner of war. I'm a soldier and free, and I'm American, right?
Exactly. And I think also they are just like so many Americans at that time. This is their country. This is their home. They genuinely want to protect it. And there was a loyalty pledge that went around. And one of the questions at the very end was, do you forswear all loyalty to the emperor? And they're like, what are you talking about? Why would we be loyal to them? We're American.
Right.
And I think, I think that when we talk about this, it's easy to forget that they're just like every other soldier who volunteered and wanting to protect their country, wanting to be of service and seeing this as their home.
I didn't bomb Pearl Harbor. I lived on Oahu. I was getting bombed, right? They were bombing me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's it. So they are proving their loyalty by fighting for a country that's holding their parents captive. And they believe like this is this system of honor. This is Bushido, right? Like they have to. This is a way to clear my family's name. I can clear my family's name from suspicion through blood, right? And these men sign up, and eventually, the need for soldiers was so great that the War Department says, "Okay, well, you guys can sign up." And these soldiers, they get pulled into the army. They volunteer for the army, and they're like kissing their mothers goodbye through a chain link fence so that they can get on the troop trains. And this, I think for a lot of people, having families back home in these camps could be a distraction, but for these guys, it's like motivation, and it's going to try to drive them above and beyond the call of duty on multiple occasions to their own personal detriment and risk, because they have to prove like we're Americans, right?
Well, and I think also too, a lot of them, when they left, their parents regardless of how they felt about them signing up, say to them, go do your family proud, like be honorable. And this idea of you're not just fighting for your country, you're not just fighting for the person beside you, you're fighting for family honor. So you can't disgrace us. And I think that probably factored into their enormous bravery as well.
Right. You have this whole samurai culture, right? The hundreds of years of like, it's better for you to die than to disgrace our family, right? And so these guys are sent out and they're going to embody this in combat. So Shana, can you talk about the training phase for these guys? They show up at places like Camp McCoy, Camp Shelby. What's the training like for them?
Well, so especially for the guys who went to Camp McCoy, which started off in Wisconsin, these were usually people who were in the Army or were in the National Guard before Pearl Harbor.
And you'll see this. It's called the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 1 Puka Puka.
Yes.
They were already, Japanese Americans already in the military when the war began. And one of the leaders is this guy that we'll probably talk about multiple times today, Young-Oh Kim, who I think is awesome. He was Korean. He wasn't Japanese American. He was Korean American, but he was the commander of this unit, or a commander in this unit. And they tried to transfer him out. They're like, oh, we'll transfer you out to a different unit. And he's like, no, these are my guys. They're with me. Like, I'm staying.
Like he literally says, because, at the time, Japan and Korea were at war. And he says, there's no Koreans in this army. There's no Japanese in this army. There's just Americans in this army.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, he was actually this incredible commander. And I think for him also being Korean American, when they put him in charge of the 100th Battalion, he sees this as a place where he can really shine. Again, the Army is full of racism, and he feels a little bit like if he's transferred away from this unit, he's going to be given a desk job, and he's not going to be given the chance to actually go out into the field and take care of his soldiers. And so he sees these guys coming down from Camp McCoy, and he meets them at Camp Shelby, which is, I want to say, Alabama?
Mississippi. They're training in Mississippi. They're training in the Jim Crow South.
Yeah. And
California was bad.
and these guys are coming down, and he starts doing the regular regiment with them, like, how to stand at attention, how to do this thing. And they're bored and they're not doing it. And he realizes that they've already done this training. Like, they know all the basics that you're supposed to teach them. So he takes them out into the field and he teaches them how to run while firing a gun, which is not a thing that they taught at that time. He teaches them to be able to do everybody else in the unit's job. So maybe you're an artilleryman, but they teach you how to use the radio and vice versa. They teach you, he taught his people how to do the job of the person above them, how to do the job of the person above that person. And, it became really useful because the 100th Battalion was known as the Purple Heart Battalion because that many people were injured and killed.
Right. Purple Heart being the medal that you receive for being wounded or killed in action. And a massive percentage, overwhelming percentage of the 100th Battalion will receive this medal. For good wounds in battle.
Yeah. And just, I think being able to think on the fly and being like, oh, okay, I did this in training camp. I know what the job is. I know what's expected. I can step in when somebody is injured.
Right. And this is kind of where we get the unit insignia, which is, or the unit motto. They call it, they say, go for broke. It's a Hawaiian term, a gambling term. That's just when you basically like put everything, bet it all on black. You go all in, and that's kind of how their fighting spirit is gonna evolve here. And so they do training in Mississippi, and we mentioned this that they can't like eat at the restaurants in town. They're training to serve the country, but they can't eat at a restaurant or like go dancing or anything. Right? They can't do any of the stuff that like soldiers in training bases usually do for entertainment because they've kind of stuck on base because not only can they not eat out at a restaurant in town, but everybody else training at the same camp still thinks that they're, quote, enemy aliens. So it's tough.
Well, and I mean, there were definitely times when they were on leave or they were allowed to go into town and they would see like white and colored signs and they would just ask, they're like, which one are we supposed to use?
Right.
And they had no idea. And there was another incident where one of the members of the 442 got on a bus. Like they'd been talking to people who were Black and they got on the bus and the Black people went to the back. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, no, just get on with us. and the bus driver wouldn't let them on at the front. And this Hawaiian man lost his temper, pulled the bus driver out, ended up having to spend a couple days in the brigade, or in the stockade. And it was just like, well, it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they get trained up and they're sent out. The story of the 442nd in World War II, they're sent to the European theater, which is, I guess that makes sense, especially if you didn't trust that they weren't going to betray you to the emperor or whatever was going on there. So you're going to fight in the Pacific, you're going to fight in Europe. So they're sent first to North Africa, and they're not given a very prestigious position out there, are they?
Yeah, they were guarding German POWs.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, at the one hand, that's a safe gig, right? You don't become the Purple Heart Battalion when you are staying at prison camp, making sure you're keeping an eye on POWs. On the other hand, hanging around a prison camp probably didn't feel that great to these guys. And, the go do honor for your family, go, fight to go for broke. These guys didn't cross the ocean to fight or to watch from the sidelines.
Yeah. Well, and I think, part of it was that the commanders they trained with, because they trained almost exclusively they were led almost exclusively by white generals, lieutenants, colonels. And so for people who had never trained with them, they're like, I don't want them in my unit. I don't want them here. I don't want them serving under me.
They're going to frag me as soon as I turn around, whatever. All the things you think about, right?
Yeah. And then the people who have trained with them are like, these guys are incredible. I would lead them anywhere. They're the most amazing unit. And so it's that thing of knowing these people, having trained with them, having lived with them, versus just, the expectations of whatever. Right.
And so they do eventually, they have something to prove. They really want to prove it, and they get their chance. And they get their chance first. I mean, a little bit of fighting in North Africa, but they kind of define their legacy in Italy. They enter the Italian campaign, and this is some of the most difficult fighting in the war. They're kind of thrown into Monte Cassino, which is one of the bloodiest campaigns of the war, and they have to fight in, scaling the Alps, where Germans and Italians have fortified stone positions that they've been hardening for 9 years or something at this point.
Oh, yeah. There was one unit where it was 40 people, and at the end of the fighting, 5 of them were able to walk away.
Wow. Yeah, this is where they start to get that Purple Heart Battalion moniker, because you're seeing these guys are being ordered to take these impossible positions, right? Charging uphill machine guns into artillery fire. Most of the cover's been blown away, and charging up a lot of times at night. But they're making these desperate charge attacks at hardened German positions along the Italian in the Italian mountains, and you start to see these Nisei soldiers, the 442nd. They are starting to perform they're so aggressive. They go for broke, and they're not just advancing; they're overwhelming enemy positions. There's this great moment. It's kind of paradoxical, but there's this moment where the 442nd starts. I mean, they're making these charge attacks, right? They're running up. They're grenades, machine guns, rifles, all this stuff. But when they would get to the end of the attack, they would scream "Banzai" as they charged into German positions with their bayonets on, and now they're in hand-to-hand combat. They're yelling "Banzai" like you would see in a World War II movie set in the Pacific. And I remember reading that and being like, "That's so weird. Why would they scream that?" Because they had to "Banzai" means 10,000 years. It means long live the emperor. I guess it's a samurai thing that they would have screamed, but why would you do this after you've done all this stuff to try to prove your loyalty to the Americans? And what I came across was that there was this very strong propaganda movement in Germany at the time. And the German soldiers were getting newsreels, the German population was getting newsreels that was telling them that the Japanese were crushing everybody in the Pacific. The Japanese are an invincible army. Nobody can stop them. They do these banzai charges. Everybody just screams and cries and runs away, and they just are stomping everybody, right? They're getting this version of the war in the Pacific that the Japanese are an unstoppable, invincible army. Nobody can defeat them in hand-to-hand combat. the 442nd knows that, and they start coming out of the woods screaming banzai at these Germans who are like, "What the hell? I thought you were on our team."
Yeah, exactly.
They've had this whole, and so they panic. And I just love the idea of these guys combating racism at home by taking advantage of the racism of the German people.
Yeah.
Like from a psychological perspective, Shana, like what I guess they were just going to use everything at their disposal.
Absolutely.
To try to win, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that being in this segregated unit, one of the lines that was fed to them was, no, it's good that you're in this segregated unit because that will show how loyal and how brave Japanese Americans are. Whereas if you were integrated into a whole bunch of other units, well, then that wouldn't stand out. And I think there is probably some truth to that. I think they were probably segregated because of racism, but use what you can to your advantage. And right. I think
the whole army was still segregated at this point. You had you had black regiments, and you had this regiment specifically is the only one. I think that was Japanese Americans, and yeah, so you have these guys, and they're fighting like in the dark in Italy, night infiltrations. They're trying to take the high ground from the Germans. They're trying to sneak up and take it before the Germans realize they're there. It's during this fighting that we get the story of Sadao Munamori. He was like kind of the epitome of go for broke. So he's doing a charge on the German positions. His squad gets pinned down by 2 machine gun nests that have a crossfire on him. So he crawls through the dirt. He knocks out both positions by getting grenades up in there. And with his rifle and grenades, he clears out 2 positions. And then as he's coming back to his buddies, a German grenade like bounces off of his helmet and lands next to 2 of his friends. Munamori is injured, and he dives on the grenade to take the blast to save his friends. He's awarded the Medal of Honor, which was something that was medals of that. It's the highest award for bravery in the American Army, and it wasn't offered to very many people of the 442nd, even though many of them we will see later deserved it. But he's awarded it basically right away because of the heroism of his actions, and that kind of sets the tone for go for broke 442nd. Let's do this.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so many stories throughout these campaigns and throughout these battles where one person stands up and, they run up the hill, they're lobbing grenades, they're taking out like 3 German machine gun nests on their own. And this isn't, obviously everybody who does this is incredibly heroic, but it's not an isolated incident.
No, this is a reputation. They start to earn a reputation for doing this sort of thing, right? Anytime there's a hill that can't be taken, a bunker that doesn't budge, they send in these guys. And they take on the most dangerous missions, but they are dangerous missions, and they're taking heavy casualties from these fightings.
Massive.
And these guys, they'll run out. Like you said, there's a million stories of this. Guy runs out into a machine gun fire to grab a wounded guy and bring him back so that they can be healed. Or get to medical attention before they die. They're charging into enemy attacks. And before long, they're earning reputation, not just among the Germans, but also among the soldiers that are fighting beside them. The white American soldiers that are fighting alongside them are like, these guys are for real. They're elite.
Absolutely. And there's also stories, just outside Rome, the American army was making the press to get into Rome, and they needed more information. And so you have Young-O Kim and another member of the 442 spending 3 days crawling at night, going through behind enemy lines so that they can capture 2 German soldiers and bring them back to be interrogated. Wow. And it's just, and I just love the story. They're like, we'll go. We'll do this. And it's massively brave and incredibly helpful in ultimately taking Rome.
Right. Yeah. And and Young-O Kim's amazing. He's going to lead the 100th, and he is going to win a medal after medal after medal. He's going to be awarded for his heroism taking on missions like that. And one thing that's interesting is these guys start to become well known, not just among the other soldiers that are fighting with them, but among the American population. Like, they start to do newsreels about these guys. There's news articles about them. Hey, Japanese Americans are out there fighting and taking machine gun positions from the Italians and the Germans. They're working on this line. Rome's going to fall. And it's because, in the 442nd out there doing their part. Yet these guys they get to see they get the newspaper clippings, and then they get their letters, which are being sent postmarked from a prison camp.
Yep.
Now, how do you think this constant reminder of their family's suffering affected their morale or their bravery?
I think probably for each person, it was a little bit different. I think that a lot of them, whether their families were in camps or whether they were exactly where they left them, it's always a struggle not being there, And there's this one guy whose family, his name was Tatsuguro Miho, and he was Hawaiian, and his father was taken away from their family, like right after Pearl Harbor. And, I think one of the ironic things is in Hawaii, they never put people in camps just because they looked at it, even though it's so much closer to Japan, it wasn't practical. So much of the population was Japanese Americans. And they kind of looked at it and they're like, well, if we put them in camps, how are we going to get to the mainland? How are we going to do this? What are we going to do for labor? And
how are we going to get food out to them, right? Because the oceans, were, the path to Hawaii was not safe, right? There were Japanese subs there.
Absolutely. But it is this practical consideration that really takes precedence, which definitely argues against the military necessity of moving people out of the West Coast.
Right.
But anyway, with Katsumiho, so his father was taken away and they had been running a hotel. And because his dad was gone and because he left and because his brother left, all of a sudden their mother's there and she can't run it anymore. There's no way she can keep this afloat. And they end up having to shut it down. And so even though his family, other than his father, are not interned in camps, there's so much disruption in their family that they can't keep their livelihood.
Right. And then this guy's got to go charge a German machine gun the next morning.
Exactly. He does. And and I think that it's got to be insanely hard. Like, I genuinely don't know how you do it. And I think one thing also worth mentioning is, well, while there was a lot of pride for the 442nd, there was also a lot of anger in these camps at being interned, at being incarcerated for no reason. You haven't done anything wrong. And so when somebody then goes and volunteers for the army of the people who are keeping you incarcerated, sometimes that can turn on your family a little bit. Like, what is your kid doing? Yeah, is your family, I don't want to say loyal, but is your family trustworthy? Or are they actually working with the American Guards who keep us in here? So I think it was more complicated than just, hey, this is awesome, your kid is so heroic. I think that there were a lot of emotions around it.
Okay, that's a good point, right? Your son's wearing the same uniform as these guys with the guns and the guard towers who are making sure we don't escape.
Exactly.
That's tough.
Yeah. So I think that it was probably really hard for all their families.
I imagine it must have been. There's no way it couldn't have been. So the fighting in Italy is progressing, and the 442nd is going to be redeployed to France. Now, I want to take one more quick break, and we'll get back to that. But before I do that, I want to mention that we are now offering ad-free episodes of the show on Patreon. So if that sounds good to you, please go check that out. Otherwise, and for those of you who are not doing that, here is an ad break.
They say everything happens for a reason, but I suspect everything happens for a Reese's. Like this commercial break. Did you need 15 seconds away from music or 15 seconds to eat a Reese's? Perhaps it's true. Everything happens for a Reese's.
Pool days call for cookouts and lots of laundry. This Memorial Day at Lowe's, save $80 on a Charbroil Performance Series 4-burner gas grill. Now just $199. Plus, get up to 45% off select major appliances to keep dishes, clothes, and food fresh. Having fun in the sun is easy with us in your corner. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 5/27. While supplies last. Selection varies by location. See associate or Lowe's.com for details.
All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I'm here with Shana Steinberg. Shana, we're moving into 1944, towards the end of 44. The 442nd is moving into France, and they've traded one set of freezing vertical mountains for another, and they're in the Vosges Mountains. This is a forest. It's an ancient labyrinth full of like German fortifications, interlocking machine gun nests, pre-sighted artillery, and one American unit is trying to make an assault on this mountain, and they get stuck. The 141st Texas Regiment, and this is one thing that I didn't really think about too much with World War II, because having a regiment named after a state feels like a very Civil War thing. But it was 141st Texas. They are making an attack. They get cut off. They're surrounded, and they're kind of fighting for their lives. They've got guys around them from every position. They're taking artillery strikes. They're running out of food. They're out of ammo, and the decision comes like, we got to go get these guys out of here. And then we enter the villain of your story, General John Dahlquist, who is, you should be happy, I hope, that it mentions his like tactical incompetence in the opening paragraph of his Wikipedia entry.
Yeah, if you created a cartoon villain of an American general, you could not have done better than Dahlquist.
He does look like the bad guy in like a movie from like the 50s about like an evil,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he is a man who has made the army his career, but he's never led troops until this moment. He has been behind, he's been doing the theories, he's been helping to plan campaigns without actually being on the front lines or without actually having ever commanded men. And so he comes out, and I think it's worth mentioning that before the Texas Battalion got lost, all of them had been fighting this incredibly difficult uphill campaign in Battalion, and they were already exhausted, and their ranks were already way depleted. And they're like, okay, great, we get a rest. And Dahlquist is like, actually, point of order, no, you don't. And you have this man, and his whole idea is like, charge.
Just throw enough bodies at it. It's wave after wave of my own men after them.
Yeah. And so, the 441, the 141 are marching, and they call back, and you have Lieutenant Higgins, and he's like, I think we're out too far. I think that we have lost everybody else around us. I think we should stop, maybe even turn back and wait for people to come. He's like, charge, go. And
you got
they
this,
do.
Boys. Go on.
Yeah.
Or food. And we haven't slept in 3 days. So
exactly.
I know Texans have a reputation for being tough, and nobody's going to doubt that, but we're tired. And that doesn't seem like the right decision.
No, and Dahlquist is yelling at them to keep going, and they end up 2 miles away from anyone else and become surrounded by Germans.
Great.
And it's obviously horrible. They're surrounded, and if they are taken, it would be this massive German PR coup to be like, look what we have. Like, we have these Texans. They're supposed to be so tough, and we have captured them. And so Dahlquist really just wants to cover his ass. Like, he wants this fixed as soon as possible.
Yeah, this was supposed to be some glorious victory for him. Oh, look at how great a tactician I am. I broke their lines,
Yeah.
and we're stuck. And he's like, I'm going to get in big trouble if I don't get these guys out of here soon. Somebody's going to be mad at me.
Exactly. Yeah. And so he looks at the 440. Yeah. And he looks at the 442nd, and he's like, you guys go. And I think also one thing for the 442nd is that they had this concern that they were just going to be cannon fodder. And Dahlquist definitely fed into that.
That was probably the plan. Like, that seems like the kind of the plan. Yeah. I don't understand what the strategy was here other than that.
Yeah. But, and there really isn't any strategy. He just shows up and he's like, go charge. It's like, but we need more people. We need more assets. And at the same time, they are trying to airdrop supplies to the 141. And most of them are ending up in German hands, or the tree cover is so dense in this place that they're exploding above them. And sometimes people are getting chopped up by wood fragments. But yeah, so they sent the 442nd after these guys, and they are doing their best, but it's uphill. It's Germans firmly ensconced, which seems to be, a pretty common thing for these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you have their commander who really wants to protect them. And he actually stands up to Dahlquist at one point. And he's like, I am not sending my men into the suicide charge. And Dahlquist shows up. He comes up to the front lines, and he's just standing up there, totally oblivious to the fact that Germans are beside him. And he has his aide-de-camp who gets shot through the head.
Oh, geez.
And yeah, and it's, you know, this is Sinclair Lewis's son. This kid is incredible. And this relatively famous aide-de-camp gets shot through the head. And Dahlquist finally is like, oh, okay, I'm going to go down so that they're not shooting at me anymore, but you guys need to go charge. And he, on his way down, is yelling at the individual soldiers who are dug in and being like, you charge, 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 go charge. And he's kicking them and he's yelling at them. And their commander, Purcell, is pissed that this guy's giving his people orders. And they hit the bottom, and Dahlquist gets back into his car and he's like, go charge. Yeah. And it's a suicide run. You know?
Yeah, it is. It is. They do it. They do it. They organize and they attack. They do it to the best of their ability. They charge through uphill through a blinding fog, through waist deep mud, into enemy gunfire, and you know, they're heroic. What they do is heroic, right? They undeniably brave and heroic. It's the charge of light brigade, though, right? This is an order that like they have to follow, but it's just not. I mean, nobody could do this, right? No military unit could do this, and they charge through. They're screaming their, you know, go for broke, banzai. They charge with bayonets and they break the line. They suffer horribly, but they get there. They get to the Texans. The cost is staggering. The rescue, there were 211 Texans surviving from the 141, and the 442nd lost 800 men trying to rescue those 200 guys. After the battle, Dahlquist orders a full regimental review to commend the 442nd for their bravery and heroism. And when they form up, there is like, you know, I think it was like 1,000 guys originally, and something like 200 show up, 100 show up from the 442nd. And Dahlquist is all mad. He's like, I thought I told you everybody to assemble. And the colonel in charge, he looks back at Dahlquist and is like, General, this is it. This is what we got left. In some companies, like you said, only a handful of people are left out of the 100 that were there. There's 20 guys left, 10. And it's a story that kind of leaves you breathless and awestruck and angry all at the same time. You can't deny their heroism, but you've got to think like, what is this?
Yeah.
What happened
Well,
here?
and also, I mean, the 442nd had already been fighting, and it was wet conditions, and they were suffering from something called trench foot, which is basically where your foot starts to rot off because it's been stuck in this boot, it's wet. And so they, even while they're charging, a lot of them are in just insane amounts of pain simply from being on their feet. And they still
like mutant athlete's foot is my understanding of it. And like, yeah, I had that once. It was the most awful thing.
Yeah. And it's literally, people would get gangrene from it. People would have their feet amputated from it. It's not just like a small irritation. It's like you could lose your leg because of trench foot. And they still managed to pull themselves together and do this incredible charge and break through to the 141.
And like you said, there's just countless stories of heroism on this attack. Countless medals are awarded, and they succeed. They succeed where a lot of other regiments would have been driven back and couldn't have kept going, or would have been annihilated or otherwise. Right? These guys were the best people in the theater at this, and they were called in to do an impossible task, and they succeeded at it, and it was undeniably like heroic. But the cost was
cost was huge. And then also a lot of them got battlefield commendations that were then degraded when they got home. Like, so instead of getting the gold, like the Silver Star, you got the Bronze Star. You know?
That was kind of across the board. That was why getting the Medal of Honor for the it was such an interesting thing, because a lot of people in this battle are recommended for Medals of Honor, and they're like, you can have Distinguished Service Cross or a Silver Star or something, but they didn't. The recommendations came from the commanding officers, and not just their commanding officers in the 442nd, but from other regiments and things. Like the 141st nominated a number of people for Medals of Honor, and the War Department downgraded them. So we move on here. The French campaign, spoiler alert, the Allies win World War II. But in the final months of the war, the 442nd splits off, and one of the component members of the Regimental Combat Team is the 522nd Field Artillery Battalion. They're sectioned off and sent into Germany, and this is where we kind of reach, I don't know, peak historical irony. The Nisei soldiers whose families are living behind barbed wire back in the States, they become the liberators of some of the subcamps of Dachau. Now, we have some new recruits here who, the army the regiment was decimated by the attack in the Rescue the Lost Battalion. And so they needed to pull up new people. They have some conscripts, they have some volunteers. There's a whole new wave of people who were volunteering from those same internment camps stateside. They go through training, they get on a boat, they come out, and now they're liberating Nazi death camps. That's really difficult to process.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to process. I mean, I think anyone who saw those death camps, there had been rumors about them all over the place. And the 442nd had come up through Italy and they'd come up through France. And they had seen these mass graves where Germans would just line up everybody in town and kill them. And that was obviously horrifying. But then to come to a place like Dachau, where people are living skeletons, they haven't had any food. They're suffering from typhus. They're suffering from so many diseases. They have been in utterly inhumane conditions. And some of it is so awful that, the soldiers were saying that they wanted to give these people their food. They wanted to give them their rations. And they were warned against it because these people were so malnourished and so starved that their body couldn't handle that many calories at once. And it would make them even sicker. Like they had to be on a specific regiment to get their nutrients to build that back up till they could eat regular food again.
Wow. I've heard stories about this, and then to know that your family's behind barbed wire at home, like I just can't imagine.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of them saw the similarities of, the Jews were same way, rounded up, had to leave everything behind, put on trains, shipped east.
What they're looking at is one step removed from what their families are suffering, right? So while the 522nd Field Artillery is out there, the 442nd is redeployed to Italy to fight and help try to break the Gothic line, which is just another series of impossible, impenetrable fortifications in the Italian Alps. Now, they're decided, they're sent there to kind of be a distraction to make sure that the Germans don't they remember to send troops down south to kind of divide them a little bit. But the 442nd is still go for broke, and their experiences so far don't change that. And they do some pretty amazing things against the Gothic line.
Absolutely. And it is what you're saying, they're kind of like, the Americans are like, don't pay attention to us over east. Like, you guys go, just be distracted. And they're like, well, if we're going to fight, we're going to fight. And they broke through the Gothic line, which was considered impossible. And it's that break, like them specifically breaking through the Gothic line and the way they did it and the way they kind of just shattered that western part of it, sent the Germans into retreat.
Yes. At Mount Fulgarito, they scaled sheer cliffs in total silence in the dead of night to attack the Germans from the rear and broke through the line there. So they climbed a mountain in the dark and then fought at the top of the mountain, a group of guys that were waiting for them, but look in the wrong direction. So they come up, they defeat them, they charge out, another go for broke, and they are able to take this position from the Germans and break through the Gothic line. It's also around this time that we see the actions of Daniel Inouye. He's a soldier from Hawaii in San Terenzo in spring of 45. He's doing another thing that we see constantly from soldiers of the 442nd. He's leading an assault on German bunkers and positions. He takes out 3 machine gun bunkers with grenades and rifle and bayonet. And then he's hit in the chest by a bullet, and then his right arm is shattered by a rifle grenade, which is basically like an RPG. He's getting ready to throw a grenade. The enemy rifle grenade hits him in the arm, blows up his arm, and he's looking at this live grenade in his hand that he can't work. So he pulls it out with his left and throws it back to take out the last bunker. He's another guy that will receive the Medal of Honor, basically no questions asked right away. No amount of talking around this is going to deny that award.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So the 442nd, they break through the Gothic line. The war winds down. The Allies are able to defeat the Axis, and the 442nd returns to the United States as the most decorated unit in American military history for its size and length of service. There's this big victory parade. There's this great ceremony in Washington, D.C. President Truman personally awards them the Presidential Unit Citation, and he famously tells the guys, "You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you have won." Now, this is a stirring quote, and it's usually where a lot of histories of the 442nd kind of hand wave a happily ever after. They come back, they one of those things, they end racism forever, everybody loves it. Though, interestingly, like the truth here is Truman says, you fought the enemy, but you not only fought the enemy, but you fought prejudice and you won. However, it's Truman's government that like put that prejudice in front of them. And they were the architects of the policies that put these guys as families in prisons in the first place. So
actually,
you get these
that was Roosevelt.
Right. You get the accolades, you get the eternal gratitude. The Lost Battalion in Texas was so enamored of what happened, and they were so grateful for the rescue that they made the 442nd honorary members of the Texas National Guard. But this isn't necessarily just a happily ever after. Everybody's doing great, everything's fine, racism's over forever kind of situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like during the war, there was a place called Hood River, Oregon. In the middle of town, they have this like big sign of everybody from town who's fighting. And they decided at a certain point to just take off all the Japanese names. And so even though these are their people, there's like, nope, we're not going to recognize it. And there was enough of an outcry that the names were finally put back. But there are a lot of people who are coming home and they're wearing their American Army uniform. And like there's one who goes into a barber shop and gets kicked out. Doesn't matter that he's a soldier. To them, all they can see is his race, you know?
And German machine gun positions under heavy fire, and I can get my hair cut. And my dad's still in prison.
Exactly.
And still denied the right to be a citizen.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think also there's a lot of people who are coming home and, you know, with the loyalty pledges at the end of 43, some people were allowed to leave the camps. They could go east, say, for instance, to school, or if they had a job waiting, they kind of had to be sponsored and have a place to go. And part of the problem is there were a lot of places that like, oh, great, you can go to nursing school. This will be great. We'll pay for it. But there were not nursing schools that would take Japanese American students. And, you know, the idea of leaving is nice. And a lot of people eventually did. However, there were also a lot of people who were older. And when they were moved out of their house, they lost their job. They lost all of their savings. They lost so much stuff. And they're in these camps. And at a certain point, they're like, well, but you guys feed us. And at least I have a roof here. I don't know what I'm going to be going back to. And so in the effort to close the camps, they set up these trailer parks. And there was one called Winona in Burbank. And it's literally trailers. And they would put 4 people on a trailer. And it was kind of like being back in the camps. I mean, they were allowed to go and try and look for jobs. But these places quickly became filthy. They became crime-ridden. And it wasn't a place that you necessarily wanted to be. But again, there are a lot of people who just didn't have anywhere else. Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, right? You said like when the order came down, because the camp system eventually ends. But when these people are initially sent there, they have 48 hours to grab whatever they can carry and go, and they have to leave the rest of their stuff. And when these people get out of the camps, it's been years. They've been in the camps for years. They've been in the camps since 42. And the camp system ends, I think, like 46, maybe late 45, early 46. And they go home, and their neighbors have robbed them. There's nothing left in their house. They, in some cases, don't own their homes anymore because it's been sold, and there's paperwork now saying that like you've never owned your home and somebody else has it. There is literally nothing to go home to because your home is not there anymore. You spent your entire life building this thing. First generation immigrant, come out here, work hard, like you do the American dream thing, right? First generation, come out here, you work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, whatever, make this world for yourself. And then you go to jail for 3 years and you come out and it's all gone. There's nothing there left. And what are you going to do, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like in the camps, yeah, you could have a job, but your pay was like $12 to $19 a month, whereas the average American pay at that time was $157 a month. So it's massive disparity.
Whenever you hear like people made $12 back then, I was like, I don't know, is that good? I feel like you could buy a car with $12 in 1945 sometimes. I never know. But okay, so 1/10. They're making 1/10 of what a regular the average person would be making.
Yeah, and they're just kind of released and being like, I don't know, good luck. We took everything from you. Go start over.
Yeah.
And just the cruelty of that, of completely disrupting somebody's life and then releasing them with nothing. And a lot of times they would go back to places that didn't want them. Mm-hmm. Like these would be cities that were happy to see their Japanese neighbors taken away. And they come back and they're,
they were like sold out by their neighbors, right? Some because the reason they were taken was because their neighbors ratted on them or sold them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you got to go live next door to that person again.
Yeah, I mean, you hear the stories of sometimes neighbors will be like, hey, I'll store your stuff. Or, they would store some of their stuff in churches and then those places would be broken into. Or they would come home thinking like, okay, well, at least I have my car. No, car's gone. So
reality is very difficult for people. It's not just happily ever after. You guys ended racism forever. These guys fought hard, they worked hard, and they still had to battle problems when they got back home. Now, I think in a large part due to the actions of the 442nd, as well as units like the 761st Tank Battalion, some of the all-black regiments, the U.S. Armed Forces is desegregated in 1948. Then, and we always kind of see this when we see the histories of the 442nd. And then in the year 2000, the government finally upgraded 20 of the Distinguished Service Crosses awarded. So we've talked about the 2 Medals of Honor that were awarded to the 442nd. In the year 2000, 20 of the Distinguished Service Crosses, which had been originally nominated as Medals of Honor, were upgraded to Medals of Honor. Now, 2000 is many, many, many decades after 1945, but it did happen, which is great. So I kind of want to close the book on Young Ok Kim also. He not only becomes a highly decorated officer, he fights in the Korean War against the North Koreans and the Chinese. I think we'll have to just do a full episode on him in the future because he's amazing. But he and the other men that fought here, they were just one of 1,000 soldiers who proved that the 442nd was capable of knocking over any barrier you set in front of them, whether it was physical or otherwise. Now, Shana, looking at the impact on the Japanese American community today, how do we balance the pride of this unit's accomplishments with the reality of what was lost?
Honestly, I wish I had a good answer to that, but I have no idea.
I don't either. I thought that would be a very compelling question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question, but I think probably each family is going to have a different answer. And I think probably those answers are going to depend on whether your son came home. Because I feel it's one thing to have pride in soldiers and pride in your children's accomplishments. But if they're not coming home, I don't know how you deal with that kind of loss.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you have a soldier who comes home and comes back and is part of the family, that probably feels a lot different than being released from the camps and not having your children around.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I do want to turn this around because this kind of this is kind of the setting for your book. So when we meet Evelyn and Nick in Echoes of Infamy, they're introduced to a veteran of the 442nd who was a combat veteran. How does the spirit of the 442nd, their go for broke, refusal to back down, how does that drive the mystery and the character dynamics in your story?
Well, so we have this soldier who's named Billy in the book, and he comes home and he's like, his mom is really sick. She has cancer. And he's like, I'm going to go see what I can do about this. I'm going to show up and tell you that you are building on stolen land, which is really what starts the mystery. But for me, I like the fact that his family history is so complicated. You know, he and his sister and his mother were sent to Manzanar. His father was arrested and sent to Tule Lake, which was a camp specifically for people under suspicion. And his brother, his eldest brother, fled. He fled to Utah and then eventually to Chicago. And so now when we meet them, it's 1949. Their father has committed suicide. The mother has cancer. And you have these three siblings who had very different experiences of war. And these two brothers looking at each other, each feeling like the other had abandoned the family. One by refusing to go into Manzanar and going east, and one by joining the army that was keeping his family hostage, basically. And I think there was probably a lot of conflicting emotions coming out of those camps. Like, did you serve? Did you not serve? Did you serve only because you were drafted, or did you refuse when your orders came up? You know, how did you handle yourself in the camps? And I think one thing worth mentioning is that being in the camps shattered a lot of traditional family norms. So it was traditional for families to always eat together. But in the camps, there was just this cafeteria. You know, teenagers wanted to go hang out with their friends. So instead of having that core family unit, in a lot of ways, it got separated and diluted. And more in my book, this family is dealing with those after effects as well.
It's an interesting thing that comes up a lot, especially when you're talking about a group of people. We talk about the Japanese Americans in the internment camps. What did they think? And the answer is like, everybody's different, right? Everybody thinks different things. And you've kind of alluded to that many times when I was like, well, what did these soldiers think when they had to charge? And you're like, it depends, right? Some of them were happy. Some of them were ready. Some of them were excited. Some of them were scared. Some of them were mad. You know, people are different. Everybody's different. And it's hard to kind of generally describe things. I think that's cool. And I think that I liked Billy's decision to kind of, you know, having the moral courage to like demand justice. I think that was a really cool touch in the book. Now, Shana, you mentioned that the story feels relevant, not just in the context of the 1940s, but also today. We're continuing to debate identity and what it means to belong. How do you see the legacy of the 442nd speaking to the challenges that we face in the present?
I think the 442nd was incredibly brave, not just for their actions, but for signing up when they did face so much racism and prejudice and being in this segregated unit. The ability to show up, to give your all, to charge under suicidal conditions is amazing to me. You know, I think that in any circumstance that is incredible, but especially this one with the way they were treated. You know, as we look towards today, I think that there's still a lot of prejudice and a lot of racism. And I think, unfortunately, there is a strong parallel between the Japanese being rounded up and put into camps and people who are immigrants in this country being rounded up and put into camps. And, you know, you hear these horrible stories of somebody being picked up at work and they don't come home and their families don't know where they are and they don't know how to reach them and they don't know how to help them. And just the sheer terror of that. And the fact that a lot of these people haven't committed crimes, that you have 5-year-old children being put in these camps. Like, in the same
And in some
way
cases, they're American
that,
citizens, right? And in some cases, they're like citizens.
yeah, yeah, in some cases they're citizens. But I think that it's impossible to look at a child and be like, yes, you are a threat. You're 5 years old and somehow you're damaging to our country.
Yes. Existential threat to our freedom.
Yes. And, I can't understand it. And one of the things that always struck me about the Japanese internment is it was everyone. It was fathers, sons, wives, children. And for couples that had one person who was Japanese and one person who was white, that parent had to make a decision of, okay, I don't have to go into camp. But if I don't go into camp, I'm being separated from my family because they're going to be there. So there were families where, a white parent was like, of course I'm staying with my kids. Of course I am. And
wow.
I think that anytime society puts a child in prison, you really, really have to take a hard look at what you're doing.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who thought this was an uplifting episode and want to hear more about it, you can definitely check out Shana's new book. It's called Echoes of Infamy. It is it's a mystery. It's not a depressing book.
Kind of like
it's a fun mystery story. But it is set in the context of the internment era of California, and it's available for pre-order now. I read it. I really enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. It comes out on May 26th, which I think is the day this is going to air. So if you're listening to this, it's probably available now, I guess. You can also check out the other books in the series. Under the Paper Moon is the first one, and An Unquiet Peace is the second one. Shana, where can people find the book or follow you online or all that stuff?
You can find the book anywhere books are sold. So Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can probably get your local bookstore to order it for you.
Independent bookstores, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Love the independent bookstores. And then I have a website at shanasteinberg.com.
All right. Well, that is our episode for today. It's got a lot of difficult topics, a lot of difficult things for us to talk about, but the 442nd Infantry kind of proved that being American is a mindset, not a race. And their courage on the ridges of Italy and in the forest of France changed history, not just on the battlefield, but on the home front as well. So, Shana, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the story with us. We really are just always happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much. I love coming on.
Yeah. Okay. And thanks to you at home for listening. If you enjoyed this dive into the Purple Heart Battalion, you can head over to our website, badassoftheweek.com. You can check us out on Patreon, all this other stuff, leave us a review, all that good stuff. Like I said, we're also offering ad-free episodes on Patreon if you want to head over there and check it out. So until next week, stay badass, go for broke, and keep fighting the good fight. We'll see you next week. Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. Executive producers are Dwayne Johnson, Danny Garcia, Andrew Jacobs, Hiram Garcia, Brian Gewirtz, Frankie Chaparino, and of course, me, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and my semi-regular but always awesome co-host, Dr. Patricia Larish. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Our mixing, music, and sound design is done by the incomparable Jude Brewer. Production support by Jean McHale-Waite. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, tell your friends, and tell your enemies. And please leave us a review. If you want to support Badass of the Week, please check out our Patreon page. We'll be back next week with another one.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Did you know if your windows are bare, indoor temperatures can go up 20 degrees? Turn the temperature down with Blinds.com and get up to 50% off custom window treatments like solar roller shades and more during the Memorial Day mega sale. Whether you want to DIY it or have a pro handle everything, we've got you. Free samples, real design experts, and zero pressure. Just help when you need it. Shop up to 50% off site-wide and huge savings on doorbusters right now during the Memorial Day mega sale at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.